Sometimes undervaluing yourself doesn't look like weakness. It looks like working too hard for too little. It looks like staying quiet to keep the peace. It looks like apologizing for your presence, downplaying your strengths, or pouring energy into people and places that never pour back. You tell yourself it's noble, that you're being strong, that it's not that bad. But underneath it all, you're slowly erasing your own value. Stoicism teaches us that our worth is not defined by praise, by position, or by how others treat us. It's defined by how we treat ourselves, by how we think, choose, speak, and act when no one's watching. Marcus Aurelius didn't say, "Become what others approve of." He said, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." That doesn't mean cruel. It means anchored. It means honest. And part of that honesty is being able to see where you've mistaken self-neglect for strength. In this episode, we'll break down 13 subtle but powerful signs you might be undervaluing yourself without even realizing it, and how to change that with clarity, virtue, and real Stoic confidence. If this message resonates with you, subscribe now to Stoic Reflections, give this video a like, and let us know in the comments which sign speaks loudest to your experience. You deserve peace, and it starts with how you see you. 1. You stay in the situations that drain you. It starts small. You tell yourself, this is just temporary. You minimize the discomfort. You rationalize the lack of fulfillment. Whether it's a job that leaves you hollow, a relationship that chips away at your spirit, or a dream you keep postponing, you stay. Not because it's right, but because you've convinced yourself it's all you deserve. And that's the silent tragedy. Not the situation itself, but the quiet belief beneath it that whispers, this is as good as it gets. Stoicism doesn't ask you to chase pleasure or run from discomfort. It asks you to know yourself, to choose what aligns with your values. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your thoughts tell you to settle, to shrink, to stay small, you'll build a life around that limitation. And the longer you remain in what drains you, the more you forget what it feels like to be fully alive. The Stoic approach isn't to complain or blame, it's to observe. If something in your life leaves you consistently depleted, ask, why am I still here? Is it duty or fear, patience or avoidance, wisdom or self-doubt? We are not meant to abandon responsibility, but we are also not meant to abandon ourselves. Enduring something that goes against your nature isn't strength, it's surrender. And if you tell yourself, I have no choice, you've already given up your power. People stay in draining jobs because they fear failure. They stay in toxic relationships because they confuse comfort with compatibility. They delay their goals because they believe everyone else is more worthy of success. But Stoicism reminds us, your environment isn't what defines you. Your response to it does. And sometimes the most courageous response isn't to endure. It's to leave, to pivot, to say, this is costing me too much, and I'm not going to keep paying the price with my peace. No one can make that choice for you. Not your friends, not your mentor, not even a philosopher. It comes from within. It comes from a moment of honesty where you finally admit, I deserve better not because I'm special, but because I'm human. You have one life, one mind, one spirit. And if something is draining it every single day, staying is not noble. It's neglect. So take a breath and evaluate. Is this job, this dynamic, this delay feeding you, or slowly dissolving who you are? What would it look like to choose differently? Even a small step can be an act of rebellion against self-doubt. And the more you practice aligning with your values, the more natural it becomes to protect your energy instead of donate it to what doesn't return it. That's not weakness, that's wisdom, that's Stoic self-respect. 2. You let external circumstances define your worth. It's easy to feel valuable when things are going well. When you're succeeding, when others are approving, when life feels stable. But what happens when the external world shifts? When you lose the job, when the relationship ends, when the recognition stops? For many, identity crumbles. Self-worth evaporates because deep down they've anchored their value to what's outside of them. And Stoicism warns us, this is a fragile, dangerous way to live. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But too often we do the opposite. We measure ourselves by numbers, by titles, by income, by beauty, by followers. And when those things change, as they inevitably do, we think we've changed, that we're somehow less, that we're no longer worthy of respect, of opportunity, of love. But Stoicism flips that completely. It says, your worth was never in the external. It was always in your character, in your response, in your alignment with virtue. Think about it. A Stoic could be in exile, in poverty, in illness, and still be dignified, still be grounded, still be powerful. Why? Because their self-respect didn't come from circumstance. It came from within. And if your mood rises and falls based on what's happening around you, you're not living, you're reacting. You're giving away control of your emotional state to people, systems, and situations that have nothing to do with your essence. The truth is, many people stay in places or roles that no longer serve them just to keep an identity alive. They think, if I quit, I'll be seen as weak. If I speak up, I'll cause conflict. If I fail, I'll prove I was never good enough. But all of that is noise. What matters isn't how life looks. It's how you show up in it. Are you courageous? Are you honest? Are you resilient? These are the real metrics of worth. Everything else is temporary. When you let your circumstances define you, you put your soul on a leash. You become afraid to grow, afraid to change, afraid to lose anything, because you believe losing the external means losing your identity. But the Stoic knows nothing outside you can give you peace, because nothing outside you owns your value. And once you understand that, you become unshakable. You can go through pain without becoming pain. You can move through failure without becoming a failure. So if you're in a season of doubt, if life feels small, if the world isn't clapping for you, don't shrink. Don't panic. Don't measure your worth by where you are. Measure it by how you are, by your discipline, your clarity, your kindness. Because palaces or prisons, applause or silence, you're still you. And that you is the only thing you truly carry through every season of life. Don't let the outside define what was always meant to come from the inside. That's the Stoic way. That's how you take back your worth. 3. You diminish your achievements. You've worked hard. You've overcome fear. You've stayed disciplined when it was easier to quit. And yet, when someone compliments your success, you shrug it off. You say it was luck, timing, a team effort. You minimize it, even laugh it away. Because somewhere deep down, you don't believe you deserve credit. This isn't humility. This is self-erasure. And Stoicism teaches that to dishonor your own effort is to dishonor the virtue it took to get there. Marcus Aurelius never wrote about celebrating greatness with arrogance, but he also never denied the discipline it took to remain calm in war, fair in judgment, and patient in pain. The Stoic path isn't about pretending your achievements don't matter, it's about knowing why they do. Not because they make you better than others, but because they show what happens when you live in alignment with reason, courage, justice, and self-control. When you constantly diminish your wins, you reinforce a dangerous message to your own mind. What I do is never enough. And over time, that message becomes your lens. No matter how far you go, you'll still feel behind. No matter how much you grow, you'll still feel small. Because the issue isn't the size of the accomplishment, it's the story you tell yourself about it. And if that story is built on downplaying and deflection, you train your brain to disconnect from progress rather than own it. Think about the effort behind every achievement, the small choices, the early mornings, the moments you didn't give up. Stoicism teaches us to value process over outcome, but it doesn't tell us to ignore the outcome completely. That's false modesty, and false modesty doesn't protect your ego. It weakens your self-image. Real humility is honest. It says, yes, I worked hard, and yes, I'm still learning. That's not arrogance. That's balance. If you find yourself always changing the subject when someone praises you, If you feel guilty for taking pride in something you built, if you worry that accepting credit makes you look full of yourself, pause. Ask, where did I learn this? Who told me that being proud of effort is a sin? Because from a Stoic perspective, if the achievement came through virtue, then it deserves to be recognized, not by others, but by you. Self-respect is not built on pretending you're nothing. It's built on knowing that you are something and that what you've done matters. Not because the world says so, but because it required real strength to do it. And when you honor your wins with quiet pride, you reinforce the very qualities Stoicism teaches you to cultivate: discipline, resilience, integrity. So from this moment forward, stop brushing it off. When you succeed, say thank you, receive the compliment, reflect on the journey. Not to gloat, but to ground. Because every step you've taken in the direction of virtue is a step toward who you're becoming. And if you keep ignoring that, you'll never feel worthy, no matter how far you go. Recognize what you've earned. Own your growth. That's not ego. That's alignment. That's the Stoic way. 4. You put everyone else first. Always on the surface, it looks noble. You show up, you stay late, you say yes, even when you're exhausted. You become the one everyone leans on, the one who carries, fixes, gives, and gives again. You tell yourself it's selflessness, that you're being strong, loyal, virtuous. But there's a quiet cost, a cost no one else sees. Because while everyone else is being taken care of, you are slowly disappearing. Stoicism teaches us that virtue lies in balance, not in martyrdom. Epictetus said, "You are not a tree, you are a human being. Move when something no longer serves your growth." Yet too often we mistake overextension for character. We believe that if we stop sacrificing, we're being selfish. But here's the truth. Giving to everyone while abandoning yourself is not generosity, it's quiet self-neglect. And over time, it leads not to peace, but to burnout, resentment, and emptiness. When you make yourself the background of your own life, when your needs are always postponed, when your rest is always later, your soul begins to notice. You feel tired but can't explain why. You feel invisible but don't want to be dramatic. You feel disconnected but keep smiling anyway. And the world rarely tells you to stop because it benefits from you running on empty. But Stoicism does. Stoicism tells you to return to yourself, to take responsibility for your well-being with the same intensity you use to care for others. This doesn't mean becoming cold or selfish. It means recognizing that you can't give from a place of depletion. You can't pour endlessly without refilling. You can't hold the world together if your own foundation is cracking. And the Stoic knows, virtue without self-awareness becomes imbalance. Justice means giving people what they deserve, but that includes you. If your standards for others are higher than the ones you hold for yourself, you're not being fair. You're being unfair to you. You have a right to rest, to say no, to choose your time intentionally. That doesn't make you weak or less noble. It makes you responsible. And when you set those boundaries, the right people will understand. The wrong ones will be upset, and that too is clarity. Because people who only love your yes don't love you. They love your availability. And you are worth more than what you can do for others. So ask yourself, am I caring out of love or out of fear? Out of compassion or out of obligation? The Stoic mind doesn't give endlessly without reason. It gives with purpose, with balance, with wisdom. And sometimes the most powerful act of strength is not to give more, but to pause, breathe, and give something back to yourself. Because the more full you are, the more authentically you can serve, and the more centered you are, the more clearly you can see who is truly worthy of your energy. That's not selfish. That's Stoic self-respect. It's time to stop vanishing behind your kindness and start showing up for you. 5. You struggle to accept compliments. It happens almost automatically. Someone says something kind. You did a great job. You're really talented. I admire how you handled that. And you instantly deflect. You downplay. You joke. You shift the focus to someone else. It feels uncomfortable, even awkward, to let the compliment land. You tell yourself you're being humble, but in reality, what's happening underneath is something far deeper. A silent belief that you're not worthy of the praise. Stoicism doesn't celebrate ego. It doesn't promote arrogance, but it also doesn't ask you to deny the truth of who you are. Marcus Aurelius himself wrote daily reminders, not to inflate his importance, but to ground himself in reality, in both his flaws and his strengths. A Stoic mind doesn't exaggerate, but it also doesn't dismiss what is earned, real, and virtuous. Rejecting compliments isn't a form of strength. It's a subtle form of self-rejection. Because every time you brush off a kind word, you reinforce the internal message that says, I'm not enough. They must be wrong. If they knew the real me, they wouldn't say that. Over time, this constant refusal to receive acknowledgement trains your brain to overlook progress, effort, and growth. It creates a blind spot, not in how others see you, but in how you see yourself. And what's more, denying a compliment doesn't just affect you, it affects others too. When someone offers genuine appreciation and you shut it down, you invalidate their truth. You make it harder for connection, for respect, for mutual recognition to exist. A Stoic understands that receiving isn't weakness, it's a practice in presence, in acceptance, in truth. To accept a compliment with grace is not to become prideful. It's to acknowledge, yes, I worked hard. Yes, I've grown. Yes, I am showing up with virtue. That's not ego. That's alignment. And when you can meet praise with quiet confidence instead of panic or discomfort, you begin to see yourself the way others already do. This is especially important if you've grown up believing that modesty means invisibility. That attention is dangerous. That pride leads to a fall. But Stoicism doesn't teach fear. It teaches clarity. And clarity means seeing your strengths as clearly as your flaws. Accepting feedback without inflation or denial. Staying grounded, not by dimming your light, but by keeping your ego anchored to reality. So next time someone says something kind, pause, breathe, say thank you, not to agree or disagree, but to honor the moment, to open the space for truth to exist. And if the praise feels unfamiliar, ask yourself why. Is it because it's false or because you've been trained to reject your own goodness? A Stoic doesn't chase validation, but they also don't run from truth. And if that truth is that you are wise, capable, disciplined, kind, then let it in. Let it support the foundation you're building. Because humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself accurately. That's the power of self-respect. That's the strength of the Stoic. 6. You fear making decisions. Every option feels like a trap. You hesitate, overthink, research endlessly, ask everyone for advice, then freeze. Not because the decision is impossibly complex, but because deep down, you don't trust yourself to choose wisely. You fear regret, you fear failure, you fear being wrong. And in that fear, you convince yourself that maybe someone else knows better, that if you wait long enough, the answer will just appear. But what you're really doing is slowly handing away your agency. Stoicism doesn't promise that every decision will lead to the perfect result. What it teaches is that right action, virtuous action, comes from reasoned judgment, not certainty. Epictetus put it clearly. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. This is the Stoic formula. Clarity, intention, execution. It's not about knowing how things will turn out. It's about acting with integrity based on what you know now. When you're afraid to decide, what you're often avoiding isn't the decision itself. It's the emotional responsibility that comes with it. If you choose and it doesn't go perfectly, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. And that idea terrifies the part of you that still equates mistakes with failure. But Stoicism reminds us, the only failure is abandoning your reason, your principles, your responsibility. Everything else, that's just life unfolding. People who chronically delay decisions often grew up in environments where their choices were criticized, where mistakes were punished, or where approval was conditional. Over time, they internalize the idea that the safest choice is no choice. But indecision is a decision too, And it's usually a decision against growth, because nothing evolves in paralysis. No peace is built on constant hesitation. The Stoic doesn't chase the perfect outcome. They aim for the most virtuous, reasonable action they can take right now, with what they know, with what they have, with who they are. And if it leads to challenge or setback, they reflect, they adapt, they learn. Because the goal is never control. The goal is alignment between values and action. So if you find yourself frozen, ask, what am I really afraid of here? That I'll choose wrong? Or that I'll have to own the result? Then ask yourself the deeper question, do I believe I have the strength to handle whatever comes next? Because at the core of decision-making isn't knowledge, it's self-trust. The belief that no matter what unfolds, you won't abandon yourself. Your life is shaped not by what you delay, but by what you do. And the longer you wait for someone else to confirm your path, the more disconnected you become from your own compass. Decision-making is a muscle. It gets stronger the more you use it. Not by being reckless, but by trusting your reason over your fear. You don't need guarantees, you need courage. You don't need to predict the future. You need to step into it. That's what the Stoic does. And with every decision made in alignment with virtue, you stop undervaluing yourself and start becoming the person you were always capable of being. 7. You're overly self-critical. You make a mistake and your mind doesn't let it go. You replay it over and over, calling yourself names you'd never say to a friend. You succeed at something, but instead of celebrating, you dissect every flaw, every should've, every microscopic imperfection. You measure your worth against an impossible standard, and when you inevitably fall short, you convince yourself that falling short is who you are. This isn't discipline, it's self-abuse. And Stoicism warns us, the goal is virtue, not punishment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't waste the rest of your life speculating about others, unless you're doing so with reference to some common good, but keep checking yourself throughout." Yes, Stoicism promotes inner examination, but it's examination through the lens of clarity, not cruelty. The point isn't to beat yourself up, it's to guide yourself back to your principles, to learn, to adjust, to grow, not to sink into shame. Being firm with yourself is essential. Stoicism is not about excuse-making, but the line between being firm and being unfair is crossed when your self-talk becomes hostile. When every mistake becomes a character flaw. When every shortcoming becomes a reason to question your worth. That kind of self-criticism doesn't lead to virtue, it leads to paralysis. Because when your inner voice becomes a bully, you stop trusting yourself to grow. You start believing that no matter what you do, it's never enough. The Stoics believed in self-correction, but not self-hatred. They knew that the only way to cultivate real strength is through rational, grounded reflection. If you fall short of courage, practice being braver. If you acted out of impulse, practice restraint. But don't label yourself as broken, weak, or unworthy. That's ego in disguise, an ego addicted to being perfect, even when it's wrapped in self-loathing. And here's the deeper truth. Overly harsh self-criticism often masks a need for control. You think that if you're hard enough on yourself, you'll prevent future pain. That if you never stop judging, you'll never fall behind. But this mindset is rooted in fear, not wisdom. And fear doesn't make you better, it makes you smaller. A Stoic knows that virtue isn't about being flawless. It's about being intentional, about learning from the stumble without turning it into an identity, about holding yourself accountable without collapsing into shame. The question isn't, did I mess up? The question is, what does this teach me about who I want to be next? That's where growth begins. That's where peace begins. So the next time your inner critic starts screaming, pause, listen, but don't obey. Ask, is this voice helping me improve or just making me feel small? Then return to your center, re-anchor in virtue. Speak to yourself like someone who deserves direction, not destruction, because you are not your worst day. You are not your last mistake. You are what you choose to become, and that becoming starts with how you speak to yourself. especially when things go wrong. That's not weakness. That's Stoic maturity. That's how you break the cycle of undervaluing yourself and start building something solid, real, and deeply resilient from within. 8. You constantly compare yourself to others. It starts so subtly. You see someone winning, and a small voice inside says, "Why not me?" You scroll past someone's highlight reel, and suddenly your life feels small. You hear about someone's success, and instead of feeling inspired, you feel behind. What began as observation becomes obsession, and that obsession becomes distortion. Stoicism calls this what it is: a distraction from your own path, your own virtue, your own peace. Marcus Aurelius warned us, ambition means tying your well-being to what other people say or do. Self-indulgence means tying it to the things that happen to you. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. When you compare yourself to others, you surrender that sanity. You shift your sense of value to an external scoreboard, one you don't control, one that's rigged with appearances, edits, and invisible context. Comparison is a thief. It steals your presence. It blinds you to your own growth. It turns your life into a competition you never signed up for. And worst of all, it conditions you to view others' success not as possibility, but as proof of your own lack. This mindset doesn't make you sharper. It makes you smaller. A Stoic sees this clearly. Comparison only has power when your inner compass is off, when you've forgotten your own metrics, when you've stopped measuring progress by character, effort, and alignment with virtue, and started measuring it by likes, money, applause, or status. But here's the truth. Someone else's beauty, intelligence, discipline, or success doesn't diminish yours. It doesn't define yours. It doesn't even relate to yours. The moment you start living by someone else's pace, you stop living by your own. And the Stoic knows that the real work is internal. Did you wake up with intention today? Did you respond to adversity with patience? Did you choose discipline over comfort, kindness over ego, clarity over reaction? That's your scoreboard. That's what matters, because those are the only things in your control. It's easy to get caught in the trap, especially in a world that constantly broadcasts curated versions of other people's lives. But a Stoic doesn't look outward for meaning. They look inward for alignment. And they understand that the only valid comparison is between who you are now and who you were yesterday. So the next time you catch yourself spiraling in someone else's lane, pause. Ask, is this thought rooted in truth or in insecurity? Is this feeling a signal to realign with my values or just a distraction from them? And then return. Return to your breath, your practice, your path. Because the Stoic path isn't about outpacing others. It's about becoming undistracted, about building peace that isn't shaken by someone else's success, about rooting so deeply in your own progress that no external noise can pull you off course. You are not them, and you were never meant to be. You are you, and that's enough. When you live it fully, when you give it your all, when you measure it by virtue, not vanity, that's how you stop undervaluing yourself. That's how you become free. 9. You postpone self-improvement. You tell yourself you'll start next week, after the chaos settles, after the pressure lifts, after the timing is better, but next week becomes next month, and next month becomes never. You read, reflect, plan, but don't act. You watch others grow and think, I'll get there eventually, all while quietly staying the same. This isn't laziness. It's a subtle form of self-abandonment, because deep down, you don't believe the effort is worth it, or worse, than that you're worth it. Stoicism teaches that the greatest tragedy isn't failure, it's inaction. Epictetus said, how long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself? Not the easiest, not the most impressive. The best, the kind of effort that demands your discipline, your presence, your values. And when you delay that work, you don't just delay progress, you delay purpose. Self-improvement isn't about perfection, it's about motion. About saying, this version of me has brought me here, but it won't take me further. It's about recognizing your own gaps, not with shame, but with resolve. Yet when you constantly delay that process, you send a quiet message to your own mind. I'm not worth the investment. And that belief bleeds into everything: your habits, your energy, your relationships, your ambition. You start to live beneath your potential, not because you can't rise, but because you stopped reaching. The Stoic doesn't seek applause, they seek progress. And progress begins with ownership. With the moment you decide that waiting for the perfect time is a lie, that someday is a trap, that the version of you who keeps stalling growth will always be stuck, not by circumstance, but by hesitation. The Stoic knows that action aligned with virtue is always worth it, even if it's small, even if it's slow. This doesn't mean hustle without rest. It means effort without excuses. Because every time you show up for your own growth, you reinforce your worth. You prove to your own mind that your life matters enough to improve, that your peace, your strength, your clarity are worth the discipline it takes to cultivate them. So stop waiting to feel ready. You won't. Growth is never convenient. It's always uncomfortable. But that discomfort is where self-respect is built. Not in the plan, not in the dream, in the doing, in the hours no one sees, in the quiet choice to align your behavior with your higher self, not your excuses. If you want to stop undervaluing yourself, stop postponing the habits that honor you. Start the routine. Read the book. Have the difficult conversation. Do the uncomfortable thing. Not because you'll be perfect, but because you're committed. Because you finally believe that your life is worth the work it takes to shape it. The Stoic way is not about waiting, it's about walking, about moving forward with resolve, even when the path is unclear. That's where confidence is born, not from what you have, but from what you become. And becoming starts now. 10. You seek constant validation. You post something and wait for likes. You say something and scan the room for nods. You succeed at something, but it only feels real if someone else praises it. Without approval, it feels incomplete. Unseen. You tell yourself you're just being social, just checking in, just making sure. But deep down, you're outsourcing your worth. You're waiting for someone to confirm what you should already know. And Stoicism reminds us, peace begins the moment you stop needing permission to be proud of yourself. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." This is the trap, believing you are free while still craving applause. Believing you're confident while still bending your choices to be more palatable, more likable, more approved. But validation is a moving target. One minute you feel high, the next you feel invisible. And the more you chase it, the more you forget how to stand still in your own truth. Constant validation seeking creates instability. It makes your self-worth fragile because it depends on something you don't control. One bad comment can ruin your day. One silent room can unravel your self-esteem. You become a puppet to the moods, opinions, and filters of others. And worst of all, you start changing who you are just to fit what you think they want. That's not growth. That's self-abandonment in disguise. Stoicism trains you to reverse that pull. Instead of looking outward, you look inward. Instead of asking, how do they approve? You ask, is this aligned with virtue? Did I act with courage, with justice, with temperance, with wisdom? If yes, then that's the only approval that matters. If no, then no amount of praise can cover the truth. People who seek constant validation often grew up being rewarded only when they performed, pleased, or succeeded. Over time, they internalize the belief that their value is conditional, that they're only worthy when someone else claps. But Stoicism shatters that illusion. Your worth isn't on trial. It doesn't increase with compliments or disappear with silence. It just is, steady, grounded, unshakable, when you live in alignment with your principles. This doesn't mean rejecting connection or feedback. It means not being ruled by it. It means building a center strong enough that praise is appreciated, but not needed. That criticism is considered, but not absorbed. That your compass stays steady even when the world spins around you. So ask yourself, would I still do this if no one noticed? Would I still speak this truth if no one clapped? Would I still pursue this path if no one approved? If the answer is yes, you're close to Stoic freedom. If the answer is no, it's time to recalibrate, because chasing validation is a trap with no finish line. But living from inner conviction, that's how you end the chase. That's how you stop undervaluing yourself. Not with louder noise, but with deeper silence. With the kind of peace that comes from knowing your life reflects your own values, not someone else's applause. That's real confidence. That's Stoic power. 11. You stay in negative environments. You know it doesn't feel right. You feel the heaviness when you walk into the room, the anxiety before the meeting, the tension that builds after every interaction. Whether it's a job, a relationship, a friendship, or even your own home, something about the environment slowly drains your spirit, and yet you stay. You tell yourself it's not that bad, that it's just a phase, that you're being dramatic. But deep down, the truth is simpler and more painful. You've convinced yourself you don't deserve better. Stoicism never glorifies suffering for the sake of it. It teaches endurance with purpose, but not tolerance of toxicity. Marcus Aurelius didn't sit in harmful situations and call it virtue. He returned constantly to clarity, to alignment with nature, to the understanding that peace is not something the world gives you. It's something you build by choosing what nurtures you. And a negative environment poisons that peace, quietly, consistently, relentlessly. When you stay in toxic spaces, you start to normalize dysfunction. You adapt to chaos. You adjust your standards. You shrink yourself just to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to maintain the illusion of stability. But the longer you stay, the more your nervous system stays locked in survival mode. And a Stoic does not live in survival mode. They live in sovereignty. The real problem isn't just the environment, it's the internal narrative that keeps you tied to it. You tell yourself you're being strong, that leaving would be failure, that enduring this is proof of loyalty or love or resilience. But Stoicism doesn't equate endurance with enlightenment. It asks, is this still serving your growth? Is this helping you live in alignment with virtue? Is this sharpening your character or suffocating it? Some people confuse resilience with tolerance, but resilience is the ability to act with strength in the face of difficulty, not to remain in difficulty that destroys your strength. You're not weak for walking away from what hurts your peace. You're weak if you abandon your peace for the sake of appearances or old habits. And here's the deeper truth. Staying in a negative environment for too long changes you. It alters your baseline for what's normal. It affects your thoughts, your sleep, your confidence, your sense of possibility. It makes you forget who you were before you started minimizing yourself to fit the dysfunction. That's not just unfortunate, it's dangerous. The Stoic way isn't about blaming the environment. It's about taking ownership of your presence within it. If it's within your control, you shift it. If it's not, you shift yourself through exit, through boundaries, through distance. Because nothing is more Stoic than choosing clarity over comfort, virtue over chaos, inner freedom over external noise. So if you're in a space that constantly makes you feel small, unsafe, undervalued, or invisible, it's not your job to keep enduring. It's your responsibility to ask, why am I still here? And more importantly, what would change if I stopped betraying myself in the name of keeping the peace? You don't need permission to protect your energy. You don't need consensus to choose your well-being. You just need the courage to act. That's Stoicism. That's self-respect. And it might be the very thing that starts bringing you back to life. 12. You tolerate disrespect because you're afraid to be alone. They ignore your boundaries. They mock your voice, dismiss your needs, make you feel like asking for respect is somehow asking for too much. And yet, you stay. You tolerate it. You convince yourself they'll change, that you're being too sensitive, that it's better than being alone. But deep down, it's not really about them. It's about the part of you that's still unsure if being alone is worse than being treated like you don't matter. Stoicism calls this out directly. It's not virtue to accept what degrades your soul. Epictetus once warned, "The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best." That's not idealism, it's emotional clarity. Because if you constantly make room for disrespect, it's not just a relationship issue, it's a self-concept issue. Somewhere along the way, you internalize the belief that discomfort is safer than solitude. And that belief is exactly what Stoic practice helps you challenge. A Stoic doesn't fear solitude. They cultivate it. They understand that alone doesn't mean abandoned. It means clear. It means aligned. It means choosing peace over pain just for the sake of company. But when you're afraid to be alone, you begin making deals with your self-worth. You start accepting treatment you'd never wish on a friend. You start excusing behavior that slowly chips away at your confidence. And with every compromise, you send your own mind a message. I'll accept this, because I'm not sure I'll find anything better. But here's the truth. Being alone isn't the risk. Staying where you are, not respected, is. Because every moment you endure disrespect teaches your nervous system to settle, to accept anxiety as normal, to mistake emotional discomfort for love. That isn't strength. That's quiet surrender. And Stoicism was never about surrendering your dignity. You don't build inner strength by letting others erode your boundaries. You build it by holding your center, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, even when it means walking away. Because once you start choosing dignity over desperation, you discover a new kind of freedom. The freedom of not needing to beg for the bare minimum. The freedom of knowing that respect isn't a luxury, it's a baseline. So if someone continually disrespects you, diminishes you, or disregards your voice, and you keep tolerating it out of fear of solitude, you're not protecting yourself. You're betraying yourself. And that betrayal is more painful, more lasting, and more damaging than any loneliness could ever be. The Stoic path is not cold, it's clear. You choose people who align with your values, not just your fears. You stay where your peace is preserved, not just where your patterns feel familiar. You walk away, not in bitterness, but in calm conviction. I choose myself because I am no longer willing to abandon who I am just to feel temporarily needed. That's not harsh. That's healing. That's not ego. That's self-respect. That's what it means to truly stop undervaluing yourself. Not by fighting others, but by finally refusing to tolerate what dishonors your inner worth. 13. You apologize for existing. You say sorry when you ask a question. You say sorry when you share a feeling. You say sorry when someone bumps into you. It becomes your reflex, your background music, your way of softening your presence in the world. And most people won't notice it, but you feel it. That shrinking, that quiet conditioning that whispers, don't take up too much space. Don't ask for too much. Don't be inconvenient. Stoicism teaches us to live with dignity, not with apology for simply being. When you apologize for your voice, your needs, your emotions, you're not practicing humility. You're rehearsing invisibility. You're training your nervous system to believe that your existence is a disruption, that your presence is something others must tolerate rather than value. And over time, this constant self-editing erodes your inner clarity. You stop expressing fully. You stop advocating honestly. You start living like a ghost in your own life. Marcus Aurelius didn't ask permission to exist. He didn't beg for space. He reminded himself daily that death was coming, and that wasting time on shame was a disservice to the gift of being alive. Stoicism teaches us to carry ourselves with presence, with quiet confidence, not arrogance, but a deep, grounded belief that we belong here, that our voice, our boundaries, our truth have weight. Not because others validate them, but because they align with nature and virtue. When sorry becomes your default, you dilute your strength. You turn connection into appeasement. You say yes when you want to say no. You say no, then feel guilty. You over-explain, overcompensate, overfunction, hoping that if you just do enough, you'll finally feel worthy of existing unapologetically. But that worthiness doesn't come from more doing. It comes from unlearning the lie that you ever had to shrink in the first place. A Stoic knows the difference between remorse and self-erasure. Remorse is when you've wronged someone. Self-erasure is when you apologize for being human, for needing rest, for asking questions, for saying, "I'm not okay." The first builds character. The second quietly destroys it. If this resonates, start small. Notice when you say sorry, then pause. Ask yourself, did I actually do something wrong? Or am I just uncomfortable taking up space? Replace sorry with thank you when appropriate. Instead of sorry I'm late, say thanks for waiting. Instead of sorry to ask, say I appreciate you listening. These shifts aren't just linguistic, they're psychological. They're how you begin to realign your inner compass towards self-respect. Because every time you apologize for your existence, you reinforce the belief that your worth is conditional. But every time you choose to stand tall, to speak clearly, to own your presence, you send a new signal to yourself and the world. I am not a problem to fix. I am a person with value. That's the Stoic standard. To live rooted in virtue, not shame. To walk through life without constantly checking yourself against imagined disapproval. To replace apology with authenticity. And to finally fully show up, not as a burden, but as a being worthy of space, voice, and peace. That's how you stop undervaluing yourself. That's how you become free. No one is coming to hand you your worth. That's the hardest truth and the most liberating one. Because once you realize it's not about who praises you, who chooses you, or who validates your journey, you're finally free to choose yourself. Stoicism doesn't ask us to chase perfection or approval. It asks us to return again and again to virtue, to clarity, to the still place inside where peace begins. If you've been undervaluing yourself, it's not because you're broken. It's because you've forgotten. Forgotten that your needs matter, that your voice matters, that your time, your energy, your presence, they matter. The world benefits from your doubt, but you don't. And the longer you postpone your growth, deny your light, or tolerate less than you deserve, the longer you stay stuck in a version of life that was never meant for you. But the moment you start choosing different, even in small ways, you begin to remember that you can walk away, that you can speak up, that you can make a decision, set a boundary, accept a compliment, and stop apologizing for being here. That's the moment the shift begins. That's the moment self-respect returns. So let this be the day you stop waiting, the day you stop dimming, the day you look at your life and say, I will no longer abandon myself to belong. I will no longer shrink to be accepted. I will live fully because I am enough, not later. Now, if this episode spoke to something in you, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel Stoic Reflections, where we walk the path of calm, clarity, and courage together, one principle at a time.